Hello everyone, and welcome back to another anime review. I am the Rat, and this is the Rat's Nest. Welcome back. It's good to be back. Obviously, I've been on a little bit of a break, a little bit of a sabbatical, you could say. But it's good to be back, and what an occasion to return to. As of the time of recording, yesterday was said special occasion. As of the time of upload, it will be 2 days ago probably. But I am, of course, talking, guys, SAO is just cleared. You know that game that started about 2 years ago, trapped about 10k people inside? Dude, some guy just cleared it. His name is Kirito or something, cleared it November 7th to 2024 at 2:55 Einkrad Standard Time. How weird is that they just cleared that game? I had kind of forgotten about it, but obviously a big date for SAO, and when I found out about it, I couldn't help but I had to literally, I dropped everything that I was planning to do last night, and I went to the store. I got me some Mike's Hard Lemonade, blueberry lime, which is okay. It's not my favorite, but it's pretty good. And I sat down and I binged the entire first 14 episodes of SAO. And SAO has a special place in my heart. I'll touch on that in a second. But this was just kind of to honor it. And this video too is part of my honoring it, part of me giving it its due respect for the effect it's had, not just on anime but on my personal life, with getting me into anime and a lot of that stuff. And I was like, what better way to celebrate it too than talk about the first 14 episodes, because it has been a long time since I watched the first 14 episodes of SAO. Like, probably the most recent I had experienced them, like in any capacity, would be the abridged. Which the abridged is phenomenal, right? So that's a very good way to experience it. But like, when that's like the most recent experience you had with it, that's kind of crazy. I even think that I've probably read Light Novel Volume 1 since I watched the anime last, and that is saying something. I read that light novel a while ago. But I rewatched it because I was like, how good is it really? I was like, I want to give an objective opinion on the Einkrad arc with my modern viewing sensibilities. Obviously, I am a very, very different person than I was when I was 12, which is weird to say. I was 12 when I picked up SAO at the first. Then I'm a very different person than I was 9 years later now. I'm 21. And how different do I view it? I'll give you a hint. I view it quite differently. But let's first say, before we get into my thoughts on SAO proper and my thoughts on the Einkrad arc now, what is my history with SAO? Because I want you guys to know where I'm coming from with this, and you can feel free to skip this if you want. Hopefully shouldn't take too long. I hope to not yap too much. I'm getting back into the recording mindset. It's been a few months. But I'll go ahead and preface this whole video by saying that I am an SAO fan. I am not an active SAO fan. Like, I have seen all through the anime, but in terms of the light novel, I've only read the first, I think, 6 volumes. Maybe just the first 4, I think. No, I've read the first 6 volumes of SAO. I've read through GGO. I've read the first 4 volumes of SAO Progressive. I have not read the spin-off. I've read the first 2 volumes of Excel World, yada, yada, yada. Whatever. I am an SAO fan. I like SAO. I love SAO, honestly. If I'm being completely real with you, I do love SAO. But I'm not an active SAO fan. So there's some things I'm probably going to lapse on. There's some things that I had to look up last night because I was curious. But I started SAO. I read it for the first time. It was the second manga and second anime I ever watched after Attack on Titan for both. It was the weirdest coincidence that led to me picking up the manga for the first time. I was literally in my 7th grade math class. And in the desk, there was a copy of the SAO Einkrad manga, like that big omnibus-sized manga. And at that point, I had already read some of AOT and watched that anime. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'll give this a try. I was quite anti-anime before AOT. But after that, I opened up my mind a little bit. And so I stole it. I really did steal it. But someone just left it there. Oh, I stole it and I read it. And I loved it. I loved it so much, and lo and behold, I actually, at the back of the book, there was the name. It was the name of one of my friends, like one of my best friends from 7th grade. And so I was like, yo, dude, I found your book. And he was like, oh, thanks for finding it. I'm like, dude, I love that. I love that series. Went and watched the anime. I was never the same. Of the first few anime I watched, SAO probably had the most effect on me because I am a huge fan of the harem genre. I have seen just about, I won't say every single harem anime. That claim is probably a bit outdated at this point because I have not kept up with it, and for good reason. A lot of them aren't good. There was a certain time in my life when I could enjoy Handmaid May, and that time of my life is not anymore. When I was 13, the summer before 8th grade, watching every single harem anime available, that was prime, right? And I would say, like, I still appreciate the harem genre and kind of the tropes that happen there. I'm definitely not as big of a fan anymore, but I am a huge fan of isekai still. And I think that is the main thing, that SAO had that effect on me, where it was one of those founding series, and obviously for anime too, SAO was huge. I don't even need to get into that. That's just obvious, right? So that's what SAO is to me. So it's a series that I first read for the first time literally 9+ years ago, which is really, really weird. That is really weird to say. It was about 9 years ago I read it for the first time. And since then, I rewatched it a lot. I have watched the Aincrad arc a lot, not recently, but just in general, I have. Obviously read the light novels, been into progressive, but it has been a long time since I sat down and watched it, and especially since I binged it in a day. It's been a few years for sure. And so I wanted to sit down and look at it again objectively and be like, what is this all about? Is this good? Is it not good? Is it better than I remember? Is it worse than I remember? And what kind of merits does it stand on as its own story? Because like I have, since I'm 12, really grown in my ability to appreciate and talk about stories on a deeper level. I'm not going to claim to be an expert at it, and I'm not going to claim to completely dissect it thematically. At the same time, I've read a lot more stories. I have a pretty good feeling of what I like, what I don't like, what is good, what isn't good. And I wanted to sit down and see what camp does Aincrad fall into. I remembered it as one of the better SAO arcs. And if not, some people call it the best. And I am still to this day a genuine, huge, active fan of progressive. I love SAO progressive so much. Legitimately so much. It is such a legitimately amazing series. And I was like, I wonder how it stacks up and that kind of stuff. So I sat down yesterday to watch it. And what did I think? The anniversary of Kirito clearing the game. I gotta say, it would have been better as a movie. Okay, so I think when looking at the Aincrad anime, as it was originally done in the anime itself, it's important to remember the context in which it was written. Because I think viewing it from a vacuum, it has a rocky start. It is very hard to get established, because you have episode 1, which is the establishing episode, right? Then you jump to episode 2, where there's basically no character continuity except for Kirito. You introduce a few new guys, and you try to have the emotional element of Diablo's death hit, and it just doesn't. And that's a common theme, I think, in the first 7-ish episodes. I'll say 6, because I will gas up episode 7. You'll understand why I gas up episode 7 in a little bit. But I think that it moves a bit too fast for the emotional moments to hit like they're supposed to. Like, as a longtime viewer and fan of the series, this stuff hits. I know how important Diablo is, especially in progressive, which is my favorite part of Sword Art Online. And so seeing his death does kind of hit a little bit. Again, I don't think that episode 2 is paced to the best, but I think that it is a good from a world building perspective. And that's what these first 7 episodes are, is world building. I admittedly can't remember if 5 and 6 are in volume 2 or in volume 1. So I will not talk on that. But you have episode 4, which is glorified filler, right? The same as episode 7 with Silica. It's fine, right? It's okay. It does a little more world building. Like Kirito kind of feels like a side character in it. And that was episode 3 is kind of like that as well. You get the Moonlight Black Cats, but it's similar to episode 2 where the emotional moment of their death doesn't really hit home because you're not given enough time to sit down and really care about them. And especially with how the series is going, you kind of expect them to die. It's very doom and gloom at the beginning. There isn't too much hope at the beginning of SAO. And I mean, rightfully so, right? But at the same time, it's pretty obvious. And so it doesn't hit home. Episode 4 is kind of filler. And so now we've had 4 episodes in a row, and the only character continuity we've had other than Kirito was Klein showing up for a little bit in episode 3 for the emotional moment. And like I said, as a longtime viewer of the series, episode 3 is emotional. But coming in and looking at it for the first time, it's hard, I think, to kind of get engaged in it. If you didn't already like the source material. So I went into the anime having already read the Aincrad manga, which is, if I remember correctly, pretty direct pacing and story plot-wise of the light novel 1. But obviously the anime adds a lot. So then you have episodes 5 and 6, which reintroduces Asuna, which is good. You get some moments of her and Kirito, and that's why I consider 5 and 6 kind of like the first continuation of the story, quote unquote. Just because, there are 2 main characters, right? Kirito and Asuna. And so getting to see their relationship develop, getting to see Laughing Coffin, getting to see Laughing Coffin introduced is obviously cool. I think that that's a good way to introduce them. I think that it worked a little bit better in just the light novel, but I'll get into that. But ultimately, these episodes are world building. Again, that's what it is. Episode 7, I will gasp because Lisbeth is best girl in SAO. You don't have to at me, right? I'd say Asuna because obviously Asuna gets the most development and also the most flanderization later. But Asuna is Kirito's wife. I wouldn't do that to my homeboy. Lisbeth is where it's my pink-haired queen. It's a very fun episode. Obviously, it's still fast, but it's a filler episode. What are you gonna do? You have to kind of rush their relationship along. Whatever. I like episode 7 because I like Lisbeth. That's the only reason, basically. I mean, it's still a good episode. Don't get me wrong. Again, more world building. Kirito gets his second sword. It's like, ooh, it's cool. There's a name I can't remember. I know the black one is Elucidator. I cannot remember the name of his other sword. If I heard it, I would remember it, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. Cool enough episode. Episode 8 is where I feel like Season 1 finally takes off a little bit. And it's also where I feel like SAO kind of locks in again. Because Episode 8 onward is obviously Light Novel 1 material, or the original SAO material. And SAO was originally written, if I'm remembering correctly, for a novel competition, right? And then it was posted online, written into a web novel before being transferred into the light novel and then the anime, right? And I think that shows in Aincrad's story structure. Because you get the beginning, right, of SAO, and then you jump to the 74th floor, and from there we essentially get to see from the ground up Kirito and Asuna's relationship grow and blossom and all that stuff, and then yada yada yada, and then the game ends on floor 75, and Kirito figures out Heathcliff is Kayaba Akihiko, and kills him and clears the game on November 7th, 2024. Another weird thing, random side tangent, another very weird thing was watching it and all the dates being in the past. I was looking at dates, I was like, I remember what I was doing that day. That's weird. It's very weird coming from someone who first read it, 6 years before the game even started. It's very, very weird to see all that. It's very, very odd just to see that it's all in the past now. It's going to get even weirder as time goes on. Shout out to my boy Kirito, 16 recently. But, nards. What was I getting into before I went on my little tangent? I was building, so that's where SAO kind of starts. And I feel like the pacing of Aincrad itself and the world building that it gives, where, Laughing Coffin is introduced with Kuradil, And it's like, okay, there. And you have the Aincrad Liberation Army is introduced. I think that Aincrad does a decent job of world building during it. I'm not going to claim that Aincrad is peak writing. There's definitely some suspension of disbelief moments you have to have. And there's some moments that kind of drag a little bit and kind of feel a little fillery. I'm looking at the Yui stuff. Obviously, Yui is an extremely important character, but her section kind of dragged a little bit in the grand scheme of things to where if you made Aincrad into a movie, that's a part you're probably cutting, and maybe referencing back to later, yada, yada, yada. Obviously, using important characters, so you have to introduce her there, but her stuff felt a little more disconnected than Aincrad typically did, because this is where the plot really feels like it starts flowing from point to point to point, where before it's been very episodic in nature. And this is whenever I locked in, and I actually really think that it is done well. However, I will also say that because you implement elements of progressive and elements from Light Novel 2 and beyond, which were written, obviously after this original SAO story was written and were written to give more context to Kirito's character, which is all good and stuff. And sure, I guess generally, yes, you would want to put that before everything else and kind of order it all chronologically. It is still, I think, the characters in the core Aincrad arc, which when I say core Aincrad arc, I mean the stuff that is directly in Light Novel Volume 1, essentially episodes 1 and 8 through 14. The characters there are, I think, inconsistent with the characters in episodes 2 through 7, especially given the progressive scene where, look, okay, I'll go on a quick progressive thing where, yes, I understand that progressive is technically completely canon and not retconny or barely retconny of the original SAO storyline and continuity. I, however, look at progressive as a soft reboot in its own universe, simply because the characters in progressive, I feel, are so different from the characters we are shown in the Aincrad arc. And we don't really get into their characters in the one episode of progressive we get, but we kind of get into their characters. And I just think that it's a bit inconsistent with what is shown later in the Aincrad arc proper. I'm not calling the Aincrad arc, the core Aincrad arc characterizations bad. I'm just saying that I don't think they necessarily line up with the earlier stuff, because obviously when writing the earlier stuff, when writing the core Aincrad arc, Reki Kawahara didn't really have this earlier stuff in mind. There's no way he could have had all of progressive in mind when he was writing this story for the story festival, right? And again, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I think that it's important for that story that he wrote, the core Aincrad story volume 1, to show the starting off point, then skip forward to a point where the story is going to be quote-unquote more interesting and the core of the story is going to happen, and then build the characters up from there, right? Which I think Aincrad does really well. I think that it builds the characters up from where they are, from zero, really well. The problem is, of course, with the anime, that they're not building them up from zero. They have some pre-established stuff, and May kind of tries to work it in a little bit. I still think the characters are inconsistent in terms of kind of how they're portrayed and their thoughts on each other and their thoughts on, their relationship and that kind of things. I think that they're a little different, and I think it's pretty clear too, even in the anime, that the core Aincrad story is kind of more in a vacuum than the first 7 episodes, because again, the first 7 episodes are never referenced again. Obviously, Sachi and the Blue and the Black Cats are brought up again because they're a core part of Kirito's story, and we just got to see that earlier than it was revealed originally in the light novel. But they aren't really referenced again. And I think that that's where it's the core Aincrad arc works really well on its own. And that's why I said at the beginning, it would have worked better as a movie. I do think that. Because I think that the core Aincrad stuff is actually really good. There's a reason it's as popular as it is. Obviously, a phenomenal, amazing setting. There's a reason it's been as inspirational as it is. SAO's setting is iconic. And obviously you have now iconic characters, but just looking at them objectively, a pretty fun character cast that sure now is generic, but at the time, I'm not going to call it mold breaking, but there's a reason that a lot of isekais after SAO took that blueprint for characters and used them again. Again, I don't think it's fair to call SAO generic when it's only generic because literally everything after it copied it. So I'm not going to call SAO generic. Now, is it Shakespeare? No. I'm not going to claim that it's Shakespeare. But you have a solid cast, a phenomenal setting, a solid enough plot and premise, a good relationship and chemistry between the protagonists. That's something else that I was actually surprised about. Asuna is flanderized to hell and back in later SAO. I am not going to try and pretend like she has a good character. I won't say at any point from here, because Mother's Rosario is amazing, right? I hope people still glaze Mother's Rosario. That was quite the popular opinion back in the day. I still really like Mother's Rosario. I'm not going to claim that she was never a good character again. I don't think that she was ever as good of a character in mainline SAO as she could have been, and she is easily the most flanderized character in all of SAO. I don't really think that's up for debate. But her here is good. She has a great character here, and that's what's important. Her and Kirito have so much chemistry, and because of her flanderization, I had forgotten how much chemistry they had. Like, they have a lot of chemistry. Like, they work really well together. And also, I watched the dub, right? I've watched the sub before, but I started off with the dub. I watched the dub because I started with the dub. Bryce Papenbrook and Asuna's voice actor actually do really well. Like, I think it's because like that was one of my first things, but I view Bryce Papenbrook's voice as Kirito's voice. Like, unless he was screaming, I heard Kirito, not Bryce Papenbrook, and that's impressive. It's very impressive because like my brain is hardwired to hear Bryce Papenbrook and go, "Oh, it's Bryce." You know, it's kind of similar to Kirito's Japanese voice, Matsuoka, where they're both my respective favorite VA in English and in Japanese. SAO Aincrad's core story arc has a lot of great things. It's just that I think the anime kind of stumbled a little bit, including the earlier stuff, where I was able to get into it really good because I had read the manga first. So I had gotten the Aincrad experience, I think, as it was supposed to be experienced, right? Which is pure, in essentially a movie-like format, in a one novel, one story-like format. Right, that's what I got it in with reading the manga first, and so I was able to be like, oh, okay, this is some good extra content. Also, good to see Argo. I did not expect to see Argo in there. Good little progressive reference. I love Argo. But I think that for a first-time viewer, especially coming in today, it would almost be a little hard to get through the first episodes. I'm not going to fully claim that. I think SAO is one of those series that's iconic enough that it kind of carries itself like that. And obviously, it's extremely iconic. I'm not going to pretend like back in the day, people were like, oh, you know, whatever. But I think back in the day, too, there were lower standards. I'm not saying that to be mean. I'm just saying that nowadays, people would look at SAO and be like, I've seen this a million times before. Whereas then it was like, this is the best thing ever. And it was at the time. I'm not going to lie to you. I do think the anime is hindered by that. I think that the core Aincrad arc story is really good. I think that for what he is, Kayaba is an interesting enough villain. I think that he's a done well enough villain. Obviously, I'm looking forward to Heathcliff being introduced in Progressive. I'm just through Volume 4. I don't know if he's out in a volume that's already out yet. I'm really looking forward to seeing what more Kawahara can do with his character. I think that for the core Aincrad story, it works. I think that that's the case with a lot of things. Could it be better? Sure, probably. But again, you have to understand the context in which it was written. He wasn't meant to be like a 14-episode long villain. It was introduced in episode 11, episode 12? He was meant to be the villain of a book that's introduced halfway through. Once you've already, if not a little bit more than halfway through, once you've already been introduced to a lot of the major players. And so I think then that like by the time he's introduced in the anime, the cast feels a little bit bloated because you have so many characters from the first 7 episodes that just don't matter anymore. And I think that that's kind of where SAO struggles a little bit. the anime anyhow. That's what I was thinking about the anime. Like if I was watching it from the first time, obviously I loved every second of it because I'm an SAO fan. I loved it. I loved seeing everything again. It was so weird. Part of the reason I know I watched the abridged more recently was I was looking at stuff through the lens of like, oh, I remember this abridged joke. Like, I was remembering it through like, oh yeah, I remember that in the abridged. And obviously the abridged is amazing. But yeah, no, altogether the Ironclad arc is really good, and I don't think that that's all nostalgia talking. I think that it's genuinely pretty well written, and if nothing else, even if people today might find it generic or boring, I think that there is too now a historical aspect to it that makes it engaging to watch. Because there are so many tropes and things that happen in there that you can point to later. Obviously, the video game interfaces being a big thing. Obviously, the kind of pseudo-harem aspect being a huge thing. Obviously, later shows lean more into the harem aspect than SAO Ironclad arc did, because the core Ironclad arc wasn't a harem. The SAO Season 1, first half of Season 1 of the anime was a pseudo, kind of, because Silica and Elizabeth were kind of introduced, but they were never serious. I think that you have the, oh, I'm hiding my power, oh, I'm secret, oh, I think that one of the things that wasn't picked up was the single love interest and the genuine romantic connection the two of them feel. When they get married, like they have sex, like that's legit. Like that's a legit bond and a legit commitment the two of them are making. And you just don't see that anymore. I wish that they did still pull that forward. But it's interesting to see the tropes and everything present there that would carry on and inspire later series in the isekai genre, which I can really appreciate. Viewing it from that historical perspective, this is the first time I've sat down and done that. And obviously that wasn't my intent, but that was partially kind of what I was looking for with it, was, okay, I wonder how this is going to look like from this lens. I don't think it disappointed. I think it did pretty well. And so overall, I loved it, and I think that it still holds up to this day. Like the anime itself might be a little rocky because of the first few episodes, and if you were kind of introducing it, I think that it would take a second to get into it. But once the core Ironclad arc locks in, it really locks in, and you can kind of forget the kind of mischaracterization and the clumsy connecting of parts between episodes 1 or 2 through 7. And 8 through 14. I think you can kind of forget and forgive the clumsy piecing together of characterization there. Overall, really well done. Very thoroughly enjoyed. It's so weird to think that the game was cleared. I got to watch it on the day of. It was great. But I loved it. I really, really loved going back through, and now I got some friends I'm gonna go through and watch the abridged with for the first time, because I want to rewatch the abridged. I actually caught up to it because I thought episode 17 came out a few months ago. No, it came out over a year ago. It's peak. I can make another video on the abridged at some point, but it's peak. Obviously, if you know, you know. SAO fans. SAO abridged is the better written SAO. It's crazy to say, but it is absolutely true. But with all that said, I think that's it. So thank you all for watching. Very good to be back. I'm having to remember my outro right now. I'm planning on uploading some different light novel reviews and stuff that I recorded like literally a year ago plus, and I just need to sit down, edit, and upload because I would like to kind of get back into the swing of things a little bit. Because it's fun. It's very fun to sit down and do stuff. I want to get back into reading more light novels and just kind of pick up everything again, because it's kind of been on pause for a little bit. But thank you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and be sure to leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us what you want to see next. Thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.